We learn everything when we're babies and children through playing. So I think if you show kids, listen, you can do this, it's just noise that we're gradually shaping down into being something beautiful. It's easy. There's no problem with that.
Film composer and performing artist Philip Shepard is on a mission to show children they can be musical. His new game, Compose Yourself, enables young people with no prior musical education to experience the joy of composing on their own. Mr. Shepard created a set of 60 cards featuring musical notation that can be combined and rearranged into thousands of different permutations. Children can compose a tune with the cards and then immediately hear what their creation sounds like on a computer or mobile device by plugging the numbers printed on each card into the game's website.
Which means when a kid is laying their cards out, you can flip a card over any direction and you hear it instantly in the way it's changed.
Players can use one of 3 ways to hear their composition played. By solo marimba, recorded by 3-time Grammy Award-winning percussionist Evelyn Glennie. Have their music played with the embellishment of a full symphony orchestra, or hear their tune played by marimba with orchestra accompaniment. Mr. Shepard got the idea for Compose Yourself when he was on a tight writing schedule himself. He was traveling in the U.S. when a director called him one evening and requested 2 new pieces of music.
I said, okay, when do you need them by? He said, well, we're mixing the film tomorrow morning, so really 9 o'clock by the latest. I thought, well, what would a classical composer do? They would probably actually come up with a single little motif and flip it around and just get as much out of it as they could.
Using transparency papers he happened to have with him, Mr. Shepard followed his hunch.
So I started writing single measures down, cutting them up, and then shuffled them up. And I literally dropped them down onto the desk in the hotel room where I was staying.
The process worked like a charm. When Mr. Shepard delivered the music the next morning, the director was more than pleased.
And he rang me the next morning. He said, yeah, Philip, we need to talk about the music you've just written for the film. He said, what's happened? I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, your style has changed. It's so much better.
It turns out Mr. Shepard's approach mimicked some of the tricks of the trade that classical-era composers commonly used.
The composers that we know very well from the classical period, so people like Haydn and Mozart, Beethoven, were not averse to kind of gamifying their creative process.
In fact, one 18th century composer named Johann Philipp Kernberger created a dice game that could generate an almost endless number of minuets and waltzes by attaching short measure values to different dice combinations.
It's so obvious as a sort of construction kit, as an idea, and that's really what we found with this game, this Compose Yourself game. But it is very much in a classical tradition of actually maximising the amount of musical material we can get from one single little block. It's what Bach did in every single fugue he wrote.
At the moment, the game does have its limitations. Children can't create their own rhythms or experiment with styles outside of classical music. But Mr. Shepard sees future versions of Compose Yourself extending into other genres and becoming a resource for parents too.
So at the moment it's in a set tempo. So I'd love it if it became a springboard for people to get serious about it.
For now, Mr. Shepard sees the game as a unique way for children to get their feet wet and play with the idea of creating music. He doesn't promise that the game will teach children how to read music. Instead, he hopes it will show young people how to have fun with it.
If we can just expose them to it, then they can choose to do it. And if they choose to do it, then we can help. But it's not teaching. It's play.